Namo Pho, Namo Fa, Namo Seng. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Welcome back in our study of the booklet named The Art of Keeping the Light, originally the 48 Methods to Nien Pho. So today we are discussing section 23 of our booklet, section 36 of the original. Precepts are Buddha. Quote, "To keep the precepts is to reign in the body. To recite the Buddha's name is to reign in the mind. Keeping the precepts for an extended period of time rectifies the body. Reciting the Buddha's name for an extended period of time leads to an empty mind." So, the precepts and the practice of recitation are not two different things. They can be seen as two different doors to practice the same thing. Two different doors to practice clarity, attention. So they are shared as one and the same essence, which is really to practice harmony and to cultivate a form of purity, of clarity of body, of our senses, of our thoughts, of our mental activities. And the right consequence of that attention, that clarity, it's a clarity of the mind. So if you want precepts and recitation, precepts and practice support one another. Why if precepts, one could say? We already discussed that on another series. But the fundamental precepts are not very difficult. Do good, don't do bad, keep a pure mind. And the 5 essential precepts of Buddhism are really the universal precepts of being a good and true man. So the precepts share the same essence, the same nature, and all 3 are universal doors. But these doors can be polluted by our own ignorance, attachment, and hatred. That's why practicing purity of one of these doors influences the 2 others. In a way, a true practice can only be a total practice. If we practice the door of the mind, but we are planting some form of negative karma, some form of negative action through our actions, through our speech, then this hasn't any sense. So I will continue reading the text. So quote, "The nature of the precepts and the nature of recitation are not two different things. Constantly keeping the precepts prevents transgressions and mistakes, while constantly reciting the Buddha's name enables the cultivator to overcome near-death karma and transcend the triple realm itself." Unquote. So as I said, practicing attention, clarity, with the door of mind while planting some form of negative action through our actions, through our speech. There is no sense to that. It is only a kind of fake Buddhism. It is a facade Buddhism, only a facade, only your way to show we are Buddhists. But the root of Buddhism is to overcome ignorance. The text shows us that the point is to constantly keep attention, be it through the precepts, be it through recitation. So in daily life, the precepts or attention to all our acts of mind, speech, and physical action nourish our clarity of mind, our recitation. It is important to actually begin with something small and to just practice that thing seriously. And then we can grow it to other moments of our life and establish a serious practice of attention, a serious practice of seeing into our own minds. So the text talks about overcoming our near-death karma. I won't go too much into that, but to put it simply, we could say all our thoughts and actions that were based on non-clarity, that were based on agitation, on ignorance, while we are dead, while we are alive and soon to be dead. Regret, for example. Regret has a very big weight on our lives and the lives of people around us. And it can be transmitted at the time of death and influence others in a very negative way. So, that's just an example. So precepts and recitation, they really serve the same goals, which is to reveal ourselves through practice, to reveal our natural tendencies, to reveal how our mind works. And it helps us to reside, to actually live and dwell within our own minds, and finally know its purity, its clarity, its freedom. So the text goes on. If your precept keeping has reached a high level, and you dedicate these virtues towards rebirth in the Pure Land, you are bound to achieve rebirth in the middle lattice grades. Unquote. Remember that in the Amitabha Sutras, not in the shorter one, but in the later ones, there are several realms. If you are really dedicated practitioner, a very good practitioner who did all the practices and who respected all the rules, and you you will go into the best realms. But there is a grade into Pure Land for everyone. And just saying one time Amitabha Buddha or Amitofo, which is really the name of our own nature of pure light and pure life at the moment of death, brings you to the Pure Land. That is actually a message which can be very important. It can save a life. I mean, if you are near death and are just full of regret for what you've done in your life, it's important to, even in that moment, to have a way, a simple way, to be one with your mind, to be one with your true nature, to accept and embrace it. And Amitabha is just that, pure light and pure love, limitless beyond time and space. So, I go on with the text. Quote, if on the other hand you cannot do both, then try to recite the Buddha's name assiduously, as though you were extinguishing a fire burning on your head. So if you're not sure of going to a certain form of paradise or to die in a very calm and serene way, then practice assiduously. Try to see your true mind. Try to see Amitabha here and now. Experience Amitabha here and now. Actually, you should practice attention, because that's what Amitabha is. That's what recitation is. Mindfulness of the Buddha, here and now, at any time. That's why we are advised to practice it assiduously. A lot of Zen teachers use the same image of the fire on the head. You should practice Zazen in the Soto circles, Soto schools, for example. You should practice the Huatu in Chan or Korean Zen. You should practice recitation in the Pure Land. And in all cases, just like a fire is burning your head, it shows us the right intention, the right determination, and also the great faith we can have in the practice. So, that part of the text really asks us to practice seriously the precepts and recitation. But what if we cannot practice both seriously? Then the text says to dive fully into the practice of recitation and to recitate the name assiduously. Because actually mind is the root. So if we root ourselves, if we root our mind to a practice that is pure and serious, that is centered on our mind beyond space and time, beyond thought, beyond body, beyond breath, beyond anything. That's what Amitabha is. That's what Amitofo is. Then we can only see that this practice based on our mind, based on recitation, based on attention, will also affect and have lots of implications on how we relate to the rest of the world, on our thoughts, on our body, on us and on others, more generally. We will see that this one true, pure, sincere practice leads us to cultivate what is good, what is just, what is leading to harmony. And it leads us to just stop with what is against harmony, what is bad for us and for others. So, if you practice fully attention through any method, here, of course, it's through the method of recitation, it leads us to doing what is good and avoiding what is bad, which is really the three pure precepts in action. They come naturally as a right consequence, as a natural consequence of a right practice. Because we kept attention, because we kept the mind, we do good and we don't do bad. Just a natural consequence. So it leads us to practice the very essence of the precepts, we could say. It's the art of the teachings of the Buddhas of the past. That's also how the precepts, the pure precepts are called, the three pure precepts of the Buddhas of the past. So, we've just seen that the precepts really are a Buddha, and that a sincere practice of attention to our own minds through recitation or otherwise leads to manifesting the essence of the precepts naturally cultivating the teachings of the Buddhas of the past, doing good, not doing bad. So next section is section 24 of our booklet and 37 of the original 48. It's called Sutras are Buddha. The text says, quote, "The entire Buddhist canon comes from the mind. If the mind is not Buddha, the teachings are just a waste. However, is there anyone's mind which is not Buddha? If so, it is only because it does not stop and think, stop and see." It would be a better translation, but so the text says very clearly that the entire Buddhist canon comes from the mind. But the mind we are talking about is the mind with a capital M. The mind that is not mind, that's why we call it mind, following the Diamond Sutra. Huangpo also used to say that I say mind, but it's not the mind you are thinking about, or you are thinking with, depending on the translation. So really, if mind, true mind, the mind that is also art, Shin, in Chinese and Japanese, if that mind isn't Buddha, then what can be? The statue on the altar? No. Buddha is enlightened. Enlightened is shedding light on darkness. A clear mind is a mind with no darkness. So, the basis of the sutra is that luminous prajna. And the sutras are just accounts of dharmic moments that can be historical or mythical. Actually, I don't care. Because yes, all the teachings of the Buddhas came from an enlightened mind. And if the mind isn't soaked, dwelling fully, exhausted, used to, enlightened by prajna, and softened by compassion, only then can the action be harmonious. Only then can we exemplify fully the Eightfold Path. If it's not based on prajna, on shedding light on our own darkness, and on compassion, then is it really the Buddha's path? So of course, the enlightened mind has nothing to do. The mind we are talking about has nothing to do with mental, intellectual kind of mind. If there is still any kind of attachment, if there is still a particular view to defend, any kind of crystallization, I could say, any kind of mundane understanding, even if it's about Dharma, then all efforts are useless. When the Dharma is planted into a relative mind, a mental, intellectual mind, we plant a seed of light. But remember, it's only when letting go, when harmonizing breath, body, and mind, when concentrating, being totally attentive, that we attain cessation, stopping. The end of that part of the text say, stop and think. It should say, stop and see. It's that kind of cessation that we already talked about, that the text is pointing to. That kind of cessation of body sensation, thoughts, breath, is the door of jhana samadhi. Our true mind is free. There is no need to suppress thoughts, because true mind is clear and pure. We just have to let it shine. And then, any practitioner can reside in this pure land. So the second part of the text says, Mahayana cultivators who have studied the Dharma must have read the Shirangama Sutra, and among them there are some who belittle the Bodhisattva Master Prapta, while praising the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara. Unquote. So these are two very important bodhisattvas, and in this very, very important sutra to chant, there are several bodhisattvas, each one demonstrating his technique, his meditation, favorite meditation, which led him to his realization, and Manjushri chooses the method of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which is sound meditation, which is returning attention on the hearing faculty. And that kind of technique of returning the light on itself, be it on hearing or on the mind itself, has been the basis for the practice of Hua too, especially in the Chan and Pure Land, kind of syncretism that evolved and which is now our tradition. And sometimes we tend to say that, well, yeah, Manjushri choose the Avalokiteshvara practice, so that's the best one, and all others are a bit less good. And of course, different practices suits different minds at different times. I think it was Linji who said, you get to give mind what it needs. And if you need a certain practice at a certain time, that's what you need. Because the important point is not to cultivate a certain practice, at least not in our school. The important point is to cultivate attention in all positions, in all postures, in all places. So I go back to the text. A tiny bit of attachment on this point is enough to plant a seed of birth and death. All their learning, far-sighted views, and profound understanding serve merely to strengthen the seeds of suffering. They are of no help at all toward the goal of escaping birth and death. I urge you to let go quickly. Let go of everything and concentrate on Buddha recitation, seeking rebirth in the Pure Land and the company of Amitabha Buddha. Unquote. So, I had already talked a bit about that great necessity to let go, but to base that let go on harmony of breath, mind, and body, on concentration. So, as I said, it's important to remember that all the ways, all the methods that are presented in the Shurangama Sutra, or any other really, is a good way to elimination, to enlightenment. It is one of the 83,000 Buddha ways. And we don't choose, we don't neglect, we don't put aside any Buddha's method. It is the right medicine for a certain kind of illness. And especially in Chan, we are very open to all the sutras and all the methods, even if we have our favorite ones, the ones from our tradition. Chan has been the vehicle for Chinese Buddhism as a whole, and it hasn't put aside any part of Buddhism. It is very different from the way Buddhism evolved in Japan, let's say, which is more sectarian in a way, even if there are way more relations between the different schools than the modern reform version tries to say. So yeah, any practice can be an upaya, a skillful mean. Any practice can be a good preliminary practice. Sometimes we just need them. So let go of your ideas of what is good, what is bad. Pick up a concentration practice like the practice of recitation and dive into it completely. As the text says, seeking rebirth in the Pure Land, I would add, of your own mind. It is important to seek something, to seek something, to want something. Of course, It's not for us that we want something. It's a goalless goal. But it's important to build up our own great determination. Of course, to want enlightenment. Enlightenment serves for nothing. But yet I will realize it. That's the spirit. So I will finish with the text. Otherwise, if you cannot let go of these attachments immediately, then dedicate the virtues of studying and explaining the Sutras towards rebirth in the Pure Land and fulfillment of the 4 great vows. This will bring rebirth in the Pure Land. If moreover you can spread the Pure Land teachings, making others understand the benefits of the Buddha recitation, then even in a wink, our thoughts will adorn the Pure Land. Thus there is no doubt that your rebirth will be at the highest lotus grade. Unquote. So that's a lot. That's a lot to say. My take on it is that really letting go to attention of body, mind and breath is the essential way. And in this matter, the Soto Zen school of Japan is totally right. Just sitting, body and mind, dropping everything. That's the purest Zen, purest form of Chan. But it's very difficult to penetrate it. It is the fruit of a lifetime of practice to do it naturally. So, in our Chan way, we tend to use concentration tools as a first step. In our Chan way, it's the way of those who enter the mind who see their own mind and polish their own Chan, polish their own Zen. It takes years and years, knowing yourself and letting go, going further and further on shedding light on your own darkness, on turning the light around on the root of mind. Years and years and years. Finally attaining great harmony of body, mind and breath. What the Soto school actually calls Satori. Just like in all other Chan, Zen, Sun, Tian schools, just in a moment, we see our minds and we are enlightened to what is happening right now in our body, mind, environment, everything. So, true purification of our own body, mind and breath. And I won't go, because in our schools it's not a school of breath, which is a yogic school or esoteric school if you want. But when you practice natural harmony, natural letting go through body, mind, breath, then naturally the inner winds, chi in Japanese, and the inner channels are softened. I won't go too much into this, but that's just a natural consequence. We don't try to cultivate it per se. So it's a kind of purification, even subtle or inner purification or harmonization, if you like, that isn't forced. It isn't born of tension, but it is born through letting go. A letting go that becomes more and more natural. But for those who are at the stage of trying to establish a practice of attention, trying to establish a practice of concentration, who didn't sow their mind, who didn't had any vision experience, even partial, of a non-egotic state, a kensho, xianxing, seeing mind, then it is also good to actually help ourselves with relative practices, skillful means, to actually help us develop a great faith. So practicing Pure Land, practicing the Sutras, practicing attention, all this leads to developing a great faith. And with that great faith, naturally comes a great doubt. The kind of doubt I'm talking about is not doubting foolishly about does that work or not work. That's the kind of doubt you have when you try to actually establish a practice of concentration. Should I change my posture, my practice? Anyway, a lot of silly questions appear. The kind of doubt I'm talking about is an existential doubt that helps us actually look at the very root of ourselves, the very doors of our attention. And we look more profoundly and more profoundly into what it means to be alive in this world. Who am I? What is this? So anyway, no need to ask yourself, will I go to the highest grade or the lowest grade of the Pure Land? As you've seen, important for us as Chan practitioners is to understand that this Pure Land is our pure mind. So we must realize our own minds. And we sincerely hope that every single being will realize his true mind right here and now. We are all enlightened. Let us realize it and act in this world as realized beings. So no good, no bad. Just this. As Mingzen Chakya used to say, taste it fully and wake up. Amitofo.